Good morning or afternoon, depending on what side of the pond you're on, and welcome to Across the Pitch. We have an extra special episode here today as Accrington Stanley iFollow voice Ben Wild is joining Arran and myself. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Good morning.
Good morning to you. It's obviously afternoon where I am, but thanks for having me on. Very much looking forward to this.
Pleasure to have you on.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, now, for those of you who aren't familiar with what iFollow is, it's how Arran and I over here in the States are able to actually watch the Stanley games. It's a subscription service where you can purchase either by the game, by the month, or even the whole season. And then every Stanley game, it will be streamed right to your computer or your cell phone app anywhere in the world, so it allows you to keep up Stanley, and Ben, of course, is the voice of that, and this is your first year, because it's the first year for Accrington Stanley iFollow. So how did you get to Accrington, and how'd you get started on the broadcast there this year?
Well, I'm in my third year of university at Salford University, which isn't too far away from Accrington, and my boss at the club is in the year above me, I think, at university, and got the job as the press officer at Accrington. And when he found out they needed some commentators for the iFollow service, he just sent an email to the university asking if anyone was interested, which I immediately replied saying, yes, I'm very, very, very interested. Especially Stanley of all clubs, because my granddad is a lifelong supporter of Stanley. My dad was born in Accrington, so there's always been kind of a second team. Always looked out for the results. So yeah, I went and did with a pre-season game against Morecambe. I went there and did a bit of practice commentary, and then I got an email a couple of days later saying, do you want to do it for the full season? I was like, yeah, absolutely. So
fabulous.
It's pretty straightforward, really, but yeah, it's a really good opportunity. I've loved it so far.
You know, I had a question here about whether Accrington was your first love or whether you just did it for the quid, but it sounds like you're in it because you have a passion for it.
Oh, I absolutely do. I mean, my main love on the football front will always be Newcastle United, for better or for worse. But yeah, like Stanley have always been a second team. So yeah, and they are now properly a second team that I actively support after the time I've spent there. And,
yeah, I'd imagine, you'd spend so much time there that it'd be hard not to like the team, you know?
No, definitely. Even if like the fan base and everyone had been so friendly and welcoming and be able to do, stuff like this, for example, I'm sure it's similar to quite a lot of clubs, but it's just something about Accrington's just quite special, really.
Yeah, I mean, last year I was kind of having to watch the Accrington games on the other team's feed, and so kind of every week I'd get whoever the other team's commentator was. So now it's really nice to have you every week and know that there's kind of a voice of Accrington Stanley, if you will. How do you feel about being able to be the voice of Accrington Stanley? Because worldwide, that's really what you are right now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there is the other lad I do it with, Will Dixon as well, who's also with me at university, and he does quite a lot of the games as well, and he's fantastic as well. But it is, it's something special about every week being able to, I know that the same people are kind of listening, so it's like the similar people, and having spoke to quite a lot of people on Twitter who say I was listening along or I was watching along or whatever, and it made it quite real when I first realised. I think after the first game I did, which was the first win of the season against MK Dons, I got told at the end of the game that someone was listening from South Korea, and I was taken aback a bit. But no, it's good, and I guess it must be good for people who tune in every week to hear the same voice and know that it's someone who, I guess knows what they're talking about and has seen the club through, the full season, and
you do
what's going on, really.
Exactly, yeah. They've got the narrative, but it's someone you can trust as well. It's like, oh, cool, Ben's back.
Absolutely, yeah, I appreciate getting positive reviews and hearing things like that. It really does add on a bit of like cherry on the top of cake that is really good and I'm thoroughly enjoying. But it's you say being the voice of Stanley, and I do take quite a lot of pride in being in a position like that. But it's just nice to know that people listen along and don't mind it being my voice, which I'm sure with my accent might not be the easiest to understand all the time, but it's nice to know that people are listening, and I've not had any negative comments yet, really. So,
well, that's good. Yeah. That's good. I imagine Phil might have struggled with your accent at the beginning of our show when we started, but I don't think that's a problem anymore, Phil.
Yeah, I'd say a couple years into it, I have most of the Lancashire accents down, and I just love hearing it. You're doing a great job on the broadcast because it really. It comes through in your broadcast that you have a passion for the team. And just like you said with Accrington Stanley, I mean, this is a historic club. And of course, it's the second incarnation. But this is a club that has roots all the way back to the original 1880s football leagues.
Well, of course, yeah, one of the founding teams of the Football League. They're one of the teams who were there right at the start and still going strong, and it's good to see them in such a positive position that they're in, because spending so many years in non-league and then winning League Two a couple of years ago, now being in League One and being the highest they've ever competed, really. So it's great to see for the entire club.
Yeah, I mean, the narrative really has changed because Stanley, they're always going to be a small club. They're always going to be fan supported. But they're not one of the clubs that you're reading about that are having financial issues, because Andy has really come in and stabilized it. And Stanley, right now, just looking at the landscape, is definitely one of the clubs that's trending upwards.
Yeah, definitely. It's everything you've said there is absolutely right. Andy's done an amazing job since he's been at the club, and the club are a lot more safe and financially, and which is good to see in the current football climate, when you get things like what happened to Bury at the start of this season, and they're not a team anymore, and being a small club similar size to that, it's always a danger if you're not one of the teams who's competing in the the Championship or the Premier League, where there's plenty of money. So yeah, Stanley at the moment is just a very positive club, and it's almost weird. And I always think that the expectation, I think, is quite different, because I'm used to supporting a Premier League team where if you lose a couple of games in a row, then you're calling for the manager's head, and people aren't happy. But you can lose a couple of games at Stanley, and people are still behind the team and willing them on, and
right
behind John Coleman, because they're legends there. And
John Coleman is an institution there.
Oh, absolutely. He's football genius. Some call him God on the terraces, which is, I don't think, an understatement, but just because of how popular he is there. And bear in mind, he's been there for so long. I think he's been there longer over his two spells than I've been alive. Just about, which is a scary thought.
I know he started in 99, 2000. Now, he did leave for a couple of years, but over...
Rochdale.
Since 99, 2000, he's overseen 4 promotions. So,
wow,
yeah, anything's going to get you God status. 4 promotions, that's certainly up there.
Yeah, and one of them, of course, being winning League Two, not just going up, but winning the entire division.
Right.
So it's silverware, it's the trophy, and for a club like Accrington who spent so many years in non-league, and then just kind of happy to be in the Football League and competing, to then go and win League Two and be competing in League One against some massive teams, really, like Sunderland were in the Premier League not that long ago, Portsmouth and Ipswich, big clubs, and yeah, it's incredible, really, how far they've come.
Yeah, it's like they always joke around that the whole population of Accrington could fit in the Stadium of Light.
Probably could.
Now, Arran, you had a couple things that you wanted to ask related to the broadcast itself, right?
Well, okay, so I wanted to ask you about that. So, you are the voice of Aki there. Does that give you a little bit more license to be a bit more biased towards Accrington, or do you still have to be, balanced with your call?
Well, that was interesting, because when I first got there, I was told by someone at the club, I can't remember who now, it was in quite a joking manner, you've got to be very biased towards Stanley and the commentating, you've got to be, which is weird, training to be a journalist, not broadcaster. You're told to be impartial all the time, so it was different going into that. But there's the license to do it where I'll never be so biased where, if the other team have scored a really good goal, I'll say it wasn't that good, or if Stanley have defended really badly or played badly, I'm not, sugar-coated, because there's no point. People watch the games that know that I'm not being truthful. But it's almost like I don't need to be biased at the moment. I've found myself celebrating goals a lot more than I did at the start of the season. Like the one Dion Charles scored against Wimbledon a few weeks ago.
Oh, yeah.
Me and Will were properly celebrating that one, as well as just trying to explain what had gone on. So, yeah, I mean, I'll always be a little bit biased towards Aki. It's because every club, or most clubs, have their own iFollow service. So the people listening to yours are going to be Aki fans as well. So may as well be a bit biased. And I think, again, had no complaints. So I'm sure it's fine, really.
Okay, so that begs the question about how you would treat some of those refereeing calls the past few weeks.
I wondered how long it would take for that to come up.
Specifically that I can think of, and I'm pretty sure that you're going to come up with the same two that I'm thinking of.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's been some absolute stinkers from referees in the last few weeks, and John Coleman said after the Wimbledon game, it seems to be getting worse and worse. Like, just every week something more bizarre or just an outrageous call will happen, and there's nothing you can do about it, really. But it's very frustrating at the moment.
What would you put that inconsistency down to in the refereeing?
It is different. It's difficult because when you're in League One, you don't get any help from technology like you do in the Premier League or other top divisions these days. But it's just, I think the refereeing in the whole of England, I think, is just generally quite poor. Because even they get the help in the Premier League, but you still see some really just strange decisions going on. And you see it all the way through down the Championship. And now I've been watching a lot of League One football this year. You see quite a lot of bad decisions as well. And I don't ever tend to sugarcoat it. Stanley have benefited from a few decisions, I think, this season that have been incorrect calls. I think there was the draw away at Coventry where they had their striker sent off, and I'm still not entirely sure why. I think the referee thought he had might have elbowed Seamus Keneally, I think, and he didn't, or Mark Hughes, sorry. But I really don't think he did, and he gave him a straight red card.
Yeah, we were shocked to see that. That was actually our very first Accrington Stanley of North America game that we watched, and we were just looking at each other going, we have no idea what that was for. You're right, though. I mean, bad refereeing it doesn't always go bad for one side. They tend to level out a little bit, but unfortunately it seems to be against Accrington in recent weeks.
Well, at the moment, yeah, I mean, the absolute pinnacle and the worst one by quite some way, I think, was Joe Pritchard's. Well, both yellow cards, actually, to be honest. I mean, there was the one in the first half where he just challenged for the ball and missed it, but I don't think he made that much contact with the opposition player, and it certainly didn't merit a yellow card. And then, the
second one was worst call I've seen. It should have been a penalty to him, and instead they gave him the simulation card when it was clearly a lot of contact made by the Wimbledon player.
Yeah, and John Coleman said after the game, he's obviously we'll have to take his word for it, but he's not a player who dives Joe Pritchard. Standing at 2-0 up in a fairly comfortable game, he's in on goal. He knows he's already on a yellow card. There's no reason for him to go down there. But even still, I mean, there was journalists around me who were, there's a guy who works for the BBC who's, supposed to be very biased, who was very just came out and said it's a terrible, terrible call. He's had his legs taken out of him and he's been booked for diving, which, you can understand. Well, actually, I was going to say you could understand it if he was quite far away, but the referee was only about 10 yards away and there was nothing blocking him. And then the linesman didn't say anything to try and overrule it or anything, so it's just a bad call all round, really. And at such a pivotal time in the game, if it's given as a penalty like it should have been, I'd like to think that Stanley would score it. That's 3-0 and the game over. Right. But instead, down to 10 men for the majority of the second half, and a little bit of pressure comes on when Stanley really, really needed that win. Good job they got it in the end.
Now, luckily, that one didn't end up hurting us, but the one to me that really hurt us was the one before that against Peterborough. Now, there was a goal that where, in my opinion, there was not only one, but there were two offsides. And the second offside, to me, happened right in front of the assistant ref. I don't know how that goal stood. And to me, that was really a turning point in the Peterborough game because that was the second goal. And once we went down 2-0, that just kind of changed the complexion of the game. That's the other one that has just been sticking with me. It was that call on the what should have been an offside goal against Peterborough.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I said at the time it was a terrible decision. And I think Ross Sykes and I can't remember who the other Stanley player was, but straight at the referee and complaining about it. They'd almost switch. Well, as soon as Ivan Toney passed it across goal, they were all, before the ball had even gone in the net, they were saying it was offside, because it was. The ball was passed forward as well. It was blatant. And so, yeah, that was just baffling, that one. I was hesitant on air to say that it was gone 2-0 because I was waiting for the flag to go, and it just never did. But yeah, that was a really bad call. And I think, did you allude to the first goal in that game being offside as well?
Yeah, I mean, that was just one of those games where it just seemed like everything was going against us. But like you said, I mean, hopefully we'll have some that will go the direction of us, because even though some of these calls the last couple of weeks have had me saying, well, I kind of wish we had VAR at that one point. I am not personally a fan of VAR, certainly not at League One. What's your opinion on that? And then your opinion on that'll kind of lead into some other questions that Aaron wanted to ask you.
Yeah, yes.
But I think in the Premier League, I think the system, it needs a lot of work. I think you could benefit from it in League One, definitely, but it would have to be a different kind of version to what it is now, because it's having to, for the referee to not be able to see the replays is really strange. Like in the World Cup in France, I thought it worked really well because the decisions were quick. If the referee wasn't sure, he'd just go and look at the screen, and you'd maybe miss a minute. But you see things in the Premier League where the ball's out of play for like 5 or 6 minutes, where they're sorted out. But like, I'd like to see it in League One. I'd like to see it across the board everywhere, so it's a level playing field. Like, I think it's really strange that in the FA Cup this season there are some games with VAR and some games without it, which is, some teams can benefit from that, where one team might go through because of VAR and one team might get knocked out because they don't have VAR, which is really strange. But I'd love to see it in League One if it was tweaked and made just more streamlined. I think get the decisions done quicker and get the right ones, hopefully, because I think Stanley would probably have quite a few more points on the board if there was VAR in League One.
I think you're quite right, but it really hasn't been implemented very, very well at all. I think there was only one instance I've seen where the referee's actually trotted off to the sideline to go and have a look at the replay with his own eyes rather than having it wired through to his headset. And I can't remember who was playing. You'll have to forgive me for this, but the call in the field was a straight red card. VAR said, hey, maybe you should go and have a look at that. And the referee ran off the sideline, and I almost fell off my chair when I saw him do that. I'm like, what's he doing? What's this man doing? He's going for a toilet break? It ended up getting, sort of overturned. You get a yellow for the challenge rather than straight red. But even the commentators are like, that's how you implement VAR.
Yeah, that's just better. That's the way it should be. I think it's really strange that referees can give a decision and then someone, however far away, miles away, can say, actually, I think you've got that one wrong. And I do think a lot of the issues with the VAR in the Premier League is with the new handball rule, but that's a conversation for a different time. But there's a few rules where it can be subjective, but where you see some refs say, yeah, that's a yellow card, or some say that's a red. So if you've got two referees trying to make the same decision over the same foul or red card or whatever, then they might not always agree. So the referee might have been right. I think the referee should definitely be able to look at it on the sideline first before it goes anywhere else, personally.
Yep, absolutely. I agree. Right. That brings us into, I guess we haven't really done this with a... we have. What am I talking about?
This is a new segment. This is a new segment.
It's a new segment. All right. This is our lightning round segment. We need some sound effects to that, Phil, I feel like. The idea is here that, Ben, I'm going to ask you some quick-fire questions, and your response can only be good or bad. Okay?
All right. I like the sound of that. Right.
So I'm just going to throw out a couple of words, and you have to tell me good or bad. How's that sound?
Okay.
You got it?
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, ready.
Let's go. Premier League winter break.
Bad.
Ooh, bad. Interesting. Premier League teams in the League Cup.
Good.
Okay, all right. I feel like we will continue with this and we'll come back to that, all right?
Okay.
League One refs.
Oh, no. Bad. Really, really bad.
The EFL in general. Ooh, now that your boss is...
Good.
Solid answer. All right, iFollow.
Oh, fantastic. Great. Good.
Agreed.
The best.
VAR.
Good, but with a little brackets on the end. If it's done properly, it's very good, but not at the moment.
Newcastle United.
Oh, bad. No, very, very good. Very good.
Sunderland.
Oh, bad.
Yeah, of course you had to answer that one, didn't you? And last one. Phoenix Rising.
Oh, good.
Yay! I got to say it was probably 100 out of 100 there. Well done.
Oh, nice one. Thanks for that.
So tell us a little bit about the Newcastle versus Sunderland rivalry from the perspective of a Newcastle supporter.
Well, it's always a game you'd look forward to, like with a lot of derbies and a lot of teams. First, as soon as the fixtures come out, you look for the derby. Definitely. It's quite an intense one. You watch quite a lot of derbies on, between maybe the Manchester clubs and ones in the East Midlands like Birmingham and Aston Villa, and there doesn't seem to be that much intensity. But when Newcastle and Sunderland play each other, you can pretty much guarantee a red card, if not two, quite a few yellows, penalties. Like it's a pretty brutal game of football normally, but it used to be quite good because Newcastle would win them more often than not. And then weirdly, when I got a season ticket at St James's Park, and I had one for 5 years, didn't beat Sunderland once, managed to lose.
Oh, no.
Oh, man, you put the hecklers on them.
Lose 3 and drew once, and then we got relegated, so couldn't play them. So we've not played them properly for, I must be getting on for 4 or 5 years, and I'm actually quite thankful because our record against them at the moment is rubbish. And even us being a Premier League team now, if we played them in League One, maybe at the Stadium of Light, I'd not be very confident because it used to be the one game a season where, or the 2 games a season where Sunderland would play like Barcelona. And
right.
It was like, it used to be, not really a joke, but just a thing of Sunderland were just guaranteed 6 points in the Premier League every season from Newcastle. And if you take off those 6 points at the end of the season, they'd probably get relegated. And then as soon as Newcastle aren't in the Premier League, they get relegated. So I think there's probably a bit of facts behind that. But yeah, it's a very, very intense derby. But I don't really miss it, to be honest, because we haven't won one since like 2012. I don't think we haven't won since.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, quite a while. So long may it continue, and them being in League One and us being in the Premier League.
I know it must make you give you a little bit of a warm feeling inside every time you look at the League One standings and see Sunderland there.
Absolutely, yeah, man. It was. I mean, I thought they'd go up last season. Of course, got the playoff final, and it might have. I'm not ashamed to say I laughed so hard when they conceded in the 94th or 5th minute at Wembley to Charlton and staying in League One. That was absolutely brilliant.
Right.
I do think they might go up this season, though. I don't think they'll win the league, but I think they might get the playoffs again because they had a really bad run of form at the start of the season, but they've picked it up over December, and they're in and around the playoffs at the moment. So I think they might go up, to be fair. But even still, they'll still be in the Championship, which in itself is quite funny as a Newcastle fan. So.
Are you looking forward to the next season of Sunderland Till I Die?
Yeah, apparently that's coming out quite soon.
Within the next 3 or 4 weeks, they said there's going to be 6 episodes, I guess, this time around.
Yeah, because I heard. I know they're not doing a new series like for this season because there wasn't any cameras at Stanley when we played them. But I think it's taken a while to come out because I think that the people who made the documentary wanted to put it out, as they wanted to, but they showed like Sunderland tried to get them to edit it so it painted the club in a bit of a more positive light because last season wasn't great for them. So I think it was probably brutal.
That was really what made the first season such great watching, was the fact that you could tell that it was just a completely unfiltered, uncensored look at something that you really don't see very often, the workings of something like that. And yeah, I mean, certainly I'm guessing the new ownership has probably said, yeah, the cameras can't quite go there, cameras can't go there anymore, that type of thing.
Do we have to look so poor and everything?
Yeah, it was just not very positive for them showing games when they're at home in a 40-odd thousand seater stadium and it's like half full.
Right.
I think they tried to almost piggyback on what Newcastle did the season before, because they were a big club who went into the Championship and then came straight back up, won the league on the last day of the season, scored a load of goals. It was quite a positive feeling around the club. And then when Sunderland go down and they're thinking, oh, they'll probably come straight back up again, we'll film it, and then they got relegated. Quite the opposite, which is great for everyone who isn't a Sunderland fan. A lot of people just watched it and enjoyed it. But I am looking forward to the second series. Hopefully they show that the Stanley game at the Stadium of Light last season, which still gets talked about fondly, when they went 2-0 up. Couldn't believe it, really. But I'm very much looking forward to it.
Still a trip to Sunderland for Stanley this year, and now the next game coming up for Stanley is coming up here on the 11th against Shrewsbury. That is a huge match for two reasons. One, because they're right in front of you in the standings right now. Shrewsbury on 35 points, Stanley on 33 points, Stanley in 17th, Shrewsbury 16th. Shrewsbury also does have a game in hand, so in terms of the table, it's really important for us to get 3 points out of that one. What are you looking at going into the Shrewsbury game? What do you think are the keys for us to take 3 points out of that one?
Well, I think it very much depends. Obviously got the two new signings that came in on deadline day. So I think they'll be looking to make an instant impact. Probably we'll definitely see both of them, I'd imagine, at some point during the game. Because I don't think Colby Bishop's back fit yet. And we have missed him and his goals. But it very much depends on which Accrington turns up. It should be a team full of energy because they've not had a game this week. But away it was away at Burton, the 1-1 draw, where Stanley played fantastically and should have taken all 3 points, and that's another refereeing decision in that game, where Burton should have been down to 10 men and Stanley would have probably got the 3 points from there, and they played really well. But then the next game, it was a couple of games along, they just didn't play anywhere near that well with the intensity and just making small errors, just passes not quite finding their man, or just poor decision making. But if they play like they did at Burton earlier on in the season, then they'll definitely be more than up for the 3 points. And Shrewsbury are a good team, though. They went toe to toe with Liverpool in the FA Cup and managed to get a draw. So they're not a bad team, but it just Stanley are very unpredictable in their performances. I think it's they've been in a routine recently where they've played pretty well in the first half and then managed to concede in the first 5 minutes of the second half.
Right.
I think with John Coleman having them for a prolonged amount of time before this game, I think they'll be full of energy and they'll definitely take the game to Shrewsbury. It's one of those that could go either way, I think.
Do you think Accrington's safe this year from relegation? I mean, in any other normal year, they'd be in a real relegation dogfight, but with Bolton having points taken off them, Southampton playing like crap, and Tranmere just being Tranmere. we don't like each other, me and Tranmere. Do you think they're safe? Can we call them safe on 36 points? Say.
I think Stanley is safe, especially with games left to play and who there's still got to play the teams around us against obviously Shrewsbury and Lincoln, MK Dons as well, and Tranmere again, I think so, and Bolton, of course. So the teams around there still got to play, but it was after I think it was the Rochdale game on New Year's Day where we lost, and John Coleman said we are in a relegation fight. There's no ifs or buts. We are in a relegation fight, which took me by surprise at the time. I thought that was a bit preemptive because obviously one less relegation place this year, but I'd say Stanley is safe. There's definitely enough in the team. I've said that since earlier on in the season. I've said there's enough in that team to say they won't go down. And I've seen, Southend absolutely terrible. I mean, of course they won against Stanley. Still not quite sure how they managed that. And Bolton, I think Bolton would probably be fine if they didn't have their points deduction.
Right.
But it's unfortunate for them that is the case. So I think them and Southend are definitely down. I don't know between. I think Tranmere as well probably would go down. So I definitely think Stanley is safe. There's worse teams than them, and they'll definitely get 3 or 4 more wins before the end of the season. So I think they'll definitely be safe.
Yeah, Rochdale is just that one team that seems to kind of have Stanley's number. They've beaten us, I think, four times in a row now, and I don't know what it is about Rochdale. It's just one of those local derbies. But then like John Coleman said, when you lose to those lower table teams like that, it does get you start to worry about the relegation line. But like you said, with one less relegation spot and Bolton having the deduction and South End playing the way that they are, it's really, Tranmere and everybody else kind of battling for that last spot right now.
Battling to avoid that last spot, yeah.
Well, yeah, that's Now you mentioned also that Lincoln is the next game coming up against Shrewsbury. The next game coming up after Shrewsbury, and they're right above Shrewsbury at the table. They're 15th right now. So yeah, this week is going to be crucial because we're actually playing both of the teams that are directly ahead of Stanley. So if we could come away from this week with 6 points, I think that would be enough that you can kind of stop thinking about worrying about relegation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even thinking about it, probably 4 points as well would probably be enough. And I think, Stanley do have 2 games on in hand on Lincoln as well. So, I think Lincoln are in terrible form as well. So it's not out of the question, especially at home, Stanley being able to beat Lincoln comfortably. I think Shrewsbury will definitely be the harder game of the two. But it's been a while since I've looked at the table at the end of the game, and it's been, Stanley's been within touching distance of another team. So there's a little bit of a gap opened up. So, yeah, it's a big opportunity to go a few places higher up in the table and wouldn't be too far off Blackpool as well.
Blackpool,
I reckon 6 definitely, but maybe 4 as well, points from the coming week. And I think you'd definitely be able to say that, pull away from the teams at the bottom and say you're safe, I think.
League One's, I agree. I think we should be right with that. But League One is a bit of an odd ball. I mean, it generally is, but it's been particularly odd this season because you've got teams like, well, let's have a look at the top of the table. You've got Rotherham, Wickham and Peterborough, all ahead of those so-called big clubs, Portsmouth, Sunderland and Ipswich. It's kind of a little just odd. I'm just going to go with odd.
No, it's very odd because being preoccupied with Stanley, I think over the Christmas period, I didn't really look at the top of the table. Even though Stanley were going on that really good unbeaten run and looked for a second, wouldn't be too far off those teams, to be fair, at one point. But start the season, Wickham and Ipswich were running away with it, and now Ipswich are down in 7th. And I remember when we went and played Rotherham and lost 1-0, Rotherham were very average. For me, I didn't think they were a team who would be, I've seen a couple of teams play this season, especially Peterborough at home, and gone, they'll be good for going up. They're a very, very good team. I remember seeing Rotherham and just thinking they were distinctly average, and I am very surprised that they are top of the league, but credit to them.
Yeah, what do you think gives them that? Why are they there? How are they there? Like, they seem to be one of those teams that are perennially under the radar.
Yeah, I mean,
they're only a plus, they're a plus 24 goal difference. They got 54 scored and only 30 allowed. So, I mean, what I'm looking at is when I look at the table, it seems like there's a lot of teams that are either really good on offense or really good on defense. And Rotherham just seems to be that team that's pretty good on both.
Yeah, they've got plenty of goals in their team. I think they've got 3 players. I think Matt Crooks, Michael Smith and Freddie Ladapo have all got, I think, around 10 and 12 goals. And Freddie Ladapo's their top scorer, I think, and off the top of my head, I think he's got about 13 goals. But there's 3 players there who are all in double figures for the season. So there's goals from all over the park, and they're pretty solid defensively. That was the one thing I did take away from that game, where the only occasion I've seen Rotherham play this season is that Stanley never looked like scoring, and it wasn't really an off day for Stanley. They just couldn't get through their defence. So they've got the makings of a good team. They've got plenty of goals in there and a very strong defence. So I can understand why they're up there, but it is still surprising.
I think it's one of those years where every team kind of has holes. Now you mentioned Peterborough, and I'm kind of in agreement with you where I think that the Peterborough and the 2 games that I've seen them, they look like the best team. when they're playing at their best, but they've also been very streaky where they kind of started out on fire, and then they went into a really bad lull where they couldn't score at all. I think they scored like 1 goal in 7 games, and now they've caught fire again, and they've won 5 in a row. So I think with Peterborough, it's really just a matter of which posh team shows up on the day.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, the away game where Stanley went 4-0 down, it wasn't a 4-0 game, and that's what John Coleman said afterwards, which I totally agree with. But they only really had 4 chances in the game and managed to take all of them. And yeah, there's other aspects in that game. Like we had two injured left backs in the space of 3 minutes in the first half, which never helps. But they've got Ivan Toney up front, who's a very, very good striker. He's definitely a league above. Well, I'd definitely say his championship standard. And he just can't seem to miss half the time. They've got Mohamed Issa as well, who's also normally good for a goal. So I think they're a bit weaker at the back than some teams, but going forward, it's just they've definitely got Marcus Madison's not there anymore, but when he was there, best front 3 in the league for me, easily. So they've just got a lot of goals in them, and they play with a lot of intensity as well, which a lot of teams can't really keep up with, and they'll just keep running at you and keep going, and they will eventually scoring a 6-0 aggregate score from the 2 games I've seen them play this season. It's pretty conclusive. They are a very good team. I'm surprised they're not top of the league, actually, but as you say, there was that lull where they didn't score or get any points for it.
It was just that one bad about 6-week stretch that really hits them off. And then of course, Wickham, they're the team that surprised everybody because they were kind of that team that everybody just thought, oh, they'll drop off, and they still only have a +4 goal difference, but here they are sitting up in second place, and goalkeeping it has really been big for Wickham. And so do you think Wickham will eventually fall off, or do you think that they'll be there at the end?
I think every team in this division manages to go through a rough patch at one point where they will just not pick up a win. But obviously, they started the season really, really well, and they would deserve to be where they were in the league. But they went through a terrible run of form. I think at the start of the year, at the end of the last year, December, January, where they weren't winning at all. They were bottom of the form table at one point, below Southend, which they were below Southend when I commentated on the game, which is how I found that out. And I looked at it and I went, that can't be right, but it was. But they have sort of recovered. I definitely think they'll be in the playoffs. I'm not sure if they'll be automatically promoted, but I can definitely see them being in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Wickham is one of those teams that's really carried by their goalkeeper. I think Alsop is top of the league in terms of if Wickham does end up getting an automatic promotion, he is definitely MVP of the league in my book. And I think that you'll see Alsop playing in a higher league next year because he's really carried that team, in my opinion, this year.
Yeah, I've seen him play a couple of times, but the game I watched obviously in depth was the Stanley game, the 1-1 draw earlier in the season. I just remember after the game being so confused as to how Stanley hadn't come away with 3 points. It was that in the Bristol game as well, 2 draws that should have really been 6 points. And I think John Coleman said after the game as well that if any other goalkeeper, Stanley would have scored 3 or 4 goals. He just kept them in the game, which is, you can start from the back with a great team. If you sort your defence out and you don't concede many goals, then you're onto a winner, really. But yeah, I think he's a fantastic goalkeeper, that Alsop, and definitely one of the best in the division. So if you've got a good goalkeeper, you're always going to grind out results, and they have a very good offensive going forward. They score plenty of goals, so they are a good team. They just seem to occasionally just lose games out of nowhere.
Hey guys, sorry to have to cut us off. I'm going to have to dip out here shortly. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I've really, really enjoyed this chat, and it's actually nice to be able to talk to the person who's talking to us usually about the game. You know what I mean? I've enjoyed this very much.
Yeah, I've absolutely loved it. Thanks for having me on. It's been a great chat and a great insight. And like I said before, it's equally nice to hear from some of the people who I'm basically talking to on the weekend.
Yeah.
Nice to know there's someone actually listening.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we're listening. Don't worry.
Yeah, absolutely. Every game, and yeah. So we'll wrap up for today because Arran Arran has to go here, but I definitely I'll chat with you here on Twitter, and I'd like for us to maybe get together and do a regular Stanley chat, maybe every other week or something like that, just to do a deep dive on Stanley for those of us that watch every week.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. I'd be well up for that. Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us, and I think that the Stanley fans out there are really going to enjoy hearing this one, and we'll look forward to hearing you on the mic against Shrewsbury here on Tuesday, and as we like to finish the show with often, on Stanley on.
Oh, fantastic! Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Great stuff, guys.